The title of my sermon today is important for me to say. And I declare that I have been learning over the years, since maybe I was in elementary school, how to be an anti-racist from a racist family, especially from a racist father. But let me first start with saying a word about the text from Matthew. Jesus was a carpenter. He wasn't a farmer, but he knew about farming ways. He also was a superb adult educator, and he knew how to use the rich metaphors of a rural life in training his disciples. The metaphors expressed in our text from Matthew today are very meaningful, to me especially. Having grown up on a large farm in South Carolina, I love Jesus' farming stories. The parable of the sower who went out to sow speaks to this, my sermon title and theme today. So looking at the story in Matthew, let's assume the seeds planted by the sowers came from the same batch. All good seed, all equipped to produce good grain for a good harvest. The bad outcome of the seed planted on the path or on the rocks or thorns was not the fault of the seed. All the seeds wanted to produce good grain. For me, the fault lies with the sower, their intentions, their values, their lack of care. The sower who planted the good seed in the good soil had good intentions, and they met those good intentions with good planting. The so-called farmers who cast their seed on the path or in the thorns might have had good intentions, but didn't pay attention to where their seeds landed. Didn't pay attention to the value of putting good seeds into good soil. But Jesus, if you notice, he didn't explain what makes for good soil. What are the ingredients of good soil? Indeed, how do we allow Jesus' radical love to launch us on the path toward being anti-racist, toward transformation and change? I think some of those ingredients, as I witnessed them particularly in my father, were humility and honesty and dreams for a better life and the conviction to act on those dreams. So this is my racial story to date. I'm a long, long way from my childhood home in a small rural farm town in South Carolina. My father was an overseer of about 20 farmhands who planted and harvested corn and alfalfa, timothy grass, and the like. They fed 1,000 Guernsey cows located in 3 different dairies. And we were just a hired help. It was on a 5,000-acre dairy farm, reminiscent really of the bygone days of the 1800s and 1900s. For about 3 years we lived in what was the original plantation house with the 3 big columns in front. I spent much of my youth working on that farm. At about age 9, what I wanted to do more than anything in the world was to drive a tractor. like the other 20 or so farmhands who were all of African descent, who were black. The day after I finished the 4th grade, I got my wish, and I kept that wish for the next 7 years. My dad was a big 6'4", 250-pound man. He could easily lift 100-pound bags of fertilizer or bring a big, tall 16-hand mule to his knees if he was misbehaving. If I weren't doing something fast enough, my dad would say, "Boy, you want me to help you with that?" Of course, I knew the right answer was always, "No, sir, I got it." I'd say to myself, "Go faster." Even with that size and strength, he was a gentle man with hands so sensitive that he could put the smallest of seed, mustard and lettuce, etc., exactly where he wanted them in the furrow he had made with his favorite mule, Kit, and a single plow. Those carefully planted tiny seeds would always grow into lush, delicious vegetables for eating fresh or for canning or freezing. He could have been the star of Jesus' story of the sower who went out to sow. In addition, he was smart in all the ways that he needed to be as an overseer or a supervisor on a farm. He had very little formal education, but he had much wisdom. I'd often ask him how many days he went to school, and he'd always tell me the same thing. "I went 2 days." I said, "Why just 2 days?" He said, "Well, one time I went as a substitute for my brother, and the other time I went by accident." As much as I wanted to know about his education, that's all I got. And that's likely not much more than that. He could read a little bit, could hardly write. Even as a teenager, I was aware, though, of his humility and his honesty, and no pretense about the way he lived. He did not bluff his way through anything. Those who worked on the farm, including me, wanted to please him, to do what was expected of us. And he never yelled. He treated all the workers with respect, as long as they stayed in their place. He helped to get them out of trouble, made sure they got to a doctor if they were sick, even though they had to go through the colored entrance to see the doctor. Yet, he was a racist. Our family was racist. Needless to say, in those days, we had no concept of being anti-racist. I often wondered if my dad were part of the KKK when they would burn crosses in our town. I was scared when I saw them. I never saw any evidence that he was part of that. The women on the farm, all of African descent, worked in our house and the houses of the owners. Not one of them ever came in the front door. Not one of them ever sat at our dining table, even though they cooked the food. They could eat, but they ate over in a corner at a counter. I never talked with my dad about this. I regret to this day not asking him the many questions I had then and now about how he maneuvered around these racist rules. He died in 1992, and I've tried many times to imagine what he might have said to me about being racist. I just don't think he could have talked about it. I can't imagine his understanding this idea of anti-racism or white privilege or white supremacy. He just lived it in ways that he wouldn't understand either. I can hear him saying now, I never had any privilege. With my mom almost 8 months pregnant with me, she had an accident and fell and had to be taken to the hospital, which caused my premature birth. I'm still working on trying to catch up with maturity. Bertha Nelson, a black woman, was the first person in our family called that day, even before the doctor. And after my birth, she took care of my mom, and according to my mom, Bertha Nelson also raised me. When I was small, she bathed me and cleaned my diapers, cooked our food, ate in our house, but never at the dining table. One of the strong symbols of keeping black folks in their place. The process of doing a racial autobiography is a little tricky when it comes to when and how and to what extent we remember the experiences of our lives. There was a point in my life, maybe in 9th or 10th grade even, when I began to notice a tension in trying to live fully in two different worlds. The white privileged world of my church and school and sports and my home, and the working world, up close and personal, with my black friends and coworkers, Jabbo and William and Sam and Crip and Willie and John and Stephen and more. All day long, and then I would go home to my white privileged house while they went home to what I'd have to call shacks with no running water, an outdoor privy, and a well in the yard. Each year when it was cold enough outside, my family would butcher 2 or 3 big hogs. There are people here in this area who still do it. For meat for the year, my dad would have 5 or 6 members of the black families on the farm to help. At noontime, we would have a big hot meal of the fresh meat and hot biscuits my grandmother made. Everyone in our white family ate inside, and all those helpers who were black would eat outside at a table or in a shed next to the house. In my first year in college, I was homesick for this experience. I always loved it. And so I came home to help, mostly to eat, I think. And as I lifted my plate of food, without thinking about it, I walked out to the table in the shed with the black folks helping that day and ate at table with them. I was changing, maturing, becoming a little anti-racist. I remember feeling good about eating with Bertha and John and Wilhelmina and Georgia. No one said a word about my eating with them, not them and nor my family. So I often wondered if silence was consent. I do recall at that time something shifting in me. The good seeds of love and respect and even the honesty I saw in my dad blossomed and gave forth fruit of the first 19 years of my life. Being the racist he was, he would not have acknowledged that reality. So exploring our life through a racial lens, through a white privileged lens, can be very transformative, but never flowing in a nice chronological order. One of the big stories of my evolution was in my late 20s, my first wife and I adopted a baby while in graduate school at Florida State University. This baby's biological mom was white, his biological dad was black. Therefore, technically, he was mixed race. But 1 ounce of black blood in the South is equal to 100%, really. My whole family, even my dad, my mom, my sister, my brother, all of them were furious with us. Each one of them wrote scathing letters, including my dad, who could hardly write. I kept those letters. I reread them this week. They hurt to the core when I read them. All the racism kept down over the years somehow came out, saying things like, birds of a feather stay together. One my sister said, I think. April and Amber are 2 biological girls who were 2 and 4. They will be the ones to suffer from this. A little black boy will do bad things to the girls. And there was more. But you know what happened? When we went home to South Carolina to share our 3 children, and introduce Judd to our family, they held him, they received him into their lives, and even though it was hard over the years, the ways that people in their town and church talked about Jerry's little black boy, my father embraced Judd, received him slowly but fully into their lives. I don't know what it was really like for them inside, but he could come in the front door, sleep in their bed, and eat at their table. Over the past 5 years, I've engaged in an in-depth racial autobiography of my life. The good soil given to me by a father who was humble and caring and committed, but yet racist, making my life far, far better than his. I have uncovered many stories where something shifted in my life, in my heart and soul. Other seeds fell on good soil. And times when good seeds fell on hard path are in the thorns of my life, making me look deeper and deeper into how much I look like the racist my dad was. Each time catching myself, remembering who I was back then and who I have become in these days. It is a deep, deep dive into being humble and honest and courageous enough to allow God's word to take root in our lives so that transformation and change are possible, both personally and in community and in family. May it be so for you and for me this day. Amen.